a little bit of context.
Are you there?
Yes, I figured I was going to interrupt someone there.
Oh no, that's great. So we can hear you perfectly. I don't know if you can see us or hear us well, but you're coming through loud and clear. But yeah, it would be wonderful. This is Kyle Lawson, by the way. I'm with Centric, but it'd be really wonderful. Yeah, if you could kind of give us your background of how you came into working with chickens and um, your vision for that, kind of your pathway into finding that the poultry work.
Yes, thank you for your patience, everyone. And also, I'm not gonna turn the camera on. I can see you all, just so you know. But otherwise, I may lose this again, and I'm not gonna move. So here's a fundamental set of principles that have guided the process by which myself and literally thousands of people who operate from an indigenous mindset, as we say, come into this space. So for me, it was about understanding three fundamental places on the planet where energy is transformed. The first one is the photosynthesis process, photosynthetic process, right? So we all know that photons and CO2 and minerals and nutrients and all of that combine to generate incredible amounts of output in the form of mostly cellulosic compounds, and that becomes tree branches, leaves, stems, grasses, and all of that. Now, the output of the photosynthetic process then generates food for literally trillions of other organisms. And so those organisms come in, and some of them can't directly process that photosynthetic output, but many do, such as cows and even chickens, right? And so on. That's the second stage of energy transformation, which is mass at a mass scale and is the fastest. In fact, the animal intervention in an ecology can take cellulosic compounds, glucose and sucrose, pretty nicely tied up, and break it apart in a matter of hours, a couple of days, in a day, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. You look at that, grass that was eaten, whether it was a cow or a sheep, and it becomes manure and it becomes urine and it becomes this incredibly transformed compound. Now, if you were to put all of that into a compost pile, it would take a year before you see soil. Now, that manure then goes into the ground, which is the third stage of transformation of energy, where I would gander 95% of all of the energy transformation processes governed by the laws of thermodynamics and materialized through the biophysical and chemical processes that have evolved over the planetary evolutionary process, are responsible for that transformation of energy in those three main stages. And in the soil is where that large scale also energy transformation process happens, which then reignites and completes the cycle. So it goes back into the photosynthesis, and that cycle of energy transformation is absolutely where all life on the planet depends. And if you interfere with it, you interfere with life itself. And to the extent that life is decreased, so is the energy transformation process. And the soil is the place where the most abundant amount of macro and micro biological systems are responsible for ensuring that all of those larger compounds get broken down all the way down to the what we call nutrients that then plants can absorb. A plant can't absorb the cellulose. That's what it produces, but it can absorb the compounds that the microbes have broken down through that process of transformation. So when you think of that, the critical element for us was to optimize the animal intervention, because that is where you start in the process of restoration and regeneration of any landscape, if you're going to do it on the basis of the natural processes. If you're going to bring inputs, you can do other forms, But if the inputs are going to be generated by the ecosystem itself, then animal intervention is absolutely critical, or you shut the system down to a crawl. And so the chicken was selected because it's more compatible socially and culturally and economically with pretty much everybody on the planet. It doesn't have cultural barriers. It doesn't have most of the barriers that exist for cattle and even turkey and pigs and sheep and goats and all of that. Most of those don't exist for chickens. I mean, it's the food of the poor, as we call it, right? But it's the universal, one of the universal healthiest proteins. And the chicken, for us, like literally, no offense to any farmers in the group, but you got to be a really stupid farmer to reckon ecology with chickens. And so that's how we came to the chicken as a livestock intervention, putting the chicken in the middle of that whole transformation of energy process. And the chicken then takes that mass scale amount of nutrients that it literally poops out and restores that biology of the soil at a speed that is just astonishingly fast. And then there's all these species that have evolved alongside that very characteristic of the chicken. For example, all the nut trees in the world have this hunger for nitrogen, which is the main output of the chicken manure. But the chicken manure, it also has all of the 13 fundamental nutrients that every plant needs to grow healthy and to produce healthy crops. And so, for example, the hazelnuts that we plant here in the Midwest protect the chickens from predators in the sun, also cool the ground so the microbiological systems explode. The chicken then feeds that system, and also we fine tune the number of chickens, the density of the chickens, to the capacity of that plant material to absorb the nitrogen. And when you balance those things out, everything explodes. And the nutritional density of the chicken now is defined by what's going on in the soil, because the manure, for example, we got the poultry sheltered, which is the coop, and then 2 paddocks for each one of those flocks. And they rotate back and forth between the paddocks. The paddocks they're planted with perennial crops, with hazelnuts on the understory, and then the overstory with other native overstory species. Like around in my farm is oaks and maples and hickory nuts and all kinds of other species that grow here. You know, even cherries and so on, basswood. And so the chicken on the bottom then is able to be not only protected from predators, but also from the sun. The chickens don't like sun very much. They are scared of open space, and the sun blinds them, and that makes them scared of predators because they can't see them. And there's this whole chickenness thing that we could get into, but I'm not. And so the energy into that unit comes in the form of feed and then sprouted grain. So now that you got the chickens there, that this soil now started to regenerate its capacity to transform energy. And as it does that, we observe this exponential growth of the capacity of that space at the bottom of that ecosystem to regenerate and to produce amazing, literally incredible amounts of forages. And we are able to sprout grain, and the grain, as it sprouts, actually harvests a lot of the nutrients from the chicken manure that was deposited in the previous rotation. And within 3, 4, 5 days, you are turning that manure back into forage, and you are also blocking and interrupting all of the biological processes of parasites and disease and all of that, because the ultraviolet rays and the of the sun and the wind and the microbiological balance of the land, of the soil, actually balances out all of those. So in 15 years and more than 500 flocks, we haven't had a single sick chicken. That's how beautiful the soil as a source of nutrition, of food, and as a source of health. And it really is in the soil where all of this magic is happening. And to the extent that we feed that biological infrastructure, it will do its job. And the hazelnuts inside those paddocks are producing at 2.5 times the rate of output of nuts that they are producing right on the other side of the fence where the chickens don't range. That's our story. That's how we came into chickens. It's scientific, it's socially compatible, it's economically very competitive. It's welfare wise, it's exactly what the chicken wants. I mean, I don't think there has been, I've done over probably 700 presentations on this, and, to PhD students and all of that. And I think every question that could be asked about this has been asked. And when we don't know the answer, we have come back and found it and codified it so that it can be used to systemically go and continue to change the way we do poultry. And the soil is the key. Protecting that soil, restoring the biological systems, the capillary water systems, the absorption, lixiviation, the retrieval of that water, the blocking the water from going up into the air, for example, when after it rains and it gets hot, to reverse that siphon that creates desertification, for example. The chicken can do an amazing job because it kind of cuts the top of that capillary water system, and then the water is also oxygenated because there is enough cavities in the soil with the worms and everything to bring oxygen all the way down to, we have dug holes down to 60 inches in depth, especially here in northern climate where the worms have to go that deep in order to survive the winter. And so they bring all this organic matter. We have found whole blades of grass 3 and 4 feet deep that the worms have brought down, so that the carbon absorption, which then supports life deeper rather than just on the 12 top inches, which is, no matter how tall the grasses are in this region, that's where 80% of the biological activity in the soil is. We have been able to change that with the chickens and change it for the better, and so that's the story that surrounds this approach we have used. But it is a blueprint for a process. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of applying science, ancestral wisdom, traditional ecological knowledge, and adapting that into modern needs so that you can produce. In our case, my farm alone, I'm now on the 9th flocks. So that's time 9 by 1,500. That's how many chickens we have raised here. And you still have to smell a chicken or smell manure. There is none of that, because all of that is immediately being processed by the biological systems of the soil, to the extent that when we rotate the chickens 2 days later, you can walk into that paddock and there is no manure. And there were 1,500 chickens there 2 days before, and people don't believe it. So we have set up campsites so that they can actually come in and see it, because people, especially scientists, don't believe that that is actually possible. And yet it is happening. So I will stop there and see if you got any reactions, but I hope I got you guys excited. I came late, but I'm coming with everything.
I'm excited. You always do. Any questions or comments, folks?
I was just going to ask, because that last comment about the manure decomposing in 2 days, that is super incredible. But how much space are you running your chickens on? 1,500 chickens.
Okay, so let's be scientific. It's not manure decomposition that is going on.
Okay.
Is manure absorption into the soil infrastructure and breaking it down, but it hasn't decomposed yet in those 2 days. It will in the next few days, but it's the process is accelerated by the health of the biological system, right? So the standard that we use is 40 square feet per chicken. That's 20 square feet per paddock, because it's divided into 2, right? And in that space, we plant hazelnuts 6 feet apart in row and 14 feet apart between rows. That gives us a total absorption of nitrogen between 350 and 450 pounds per production unit. The total output of nitrogen that is actually deposited in the field by 1,500 chickens, 3 flocks a year, is approximately the same exact amount as the capacity of absorption of those hazelnuts. That has been meticulously developed using manure, chicken manure analysis, nutritional analysis out of the University of Missouri. And so we're able, because it's not exact, because the chickens are ranging during the day and then they sleep in the building at night. And the manure from the building, we don't put that out into the paddocks. We take that manure and use it in the gardens and the agroforestry systems where there is no chickens. And so the chicken, if you look at the output of manure from a chicken in a conventional confinement facility, you get 100% of the manure in a single space. The chicken mostly defecates when it's relaxed at night. And that means not a lot of the chicken manure is being laid out in the fields during the day. And that is what allows us to put that density of chickens and never overload the nutritional components. In fact, if you want to know what nitrogen will do to a hazelnut, all you have to do is look at the hormones in plants that are responsible for roots and foliage, and the ones that are responsible for flowers and fruit. And if you put too much nitrogen, your corn or whatever you plant, it's just going to go in the stems and it's not going to produce anything. And instead, we got 2.5 more productivity inside the paddocks than otherwise. So that is all of this. I mean, even though it's not completely accurate, because we haven't been able to figure out exactly how much they deposit of their manure in the buildings versus outdoor, we estimated based on those volumes that are estimated per chicken, and based on how much we harvest out of the barns, how much they actually lay out in the fields, and did our best to ensure that we were actually just providing the proper nutritional levels of the proper volumes in the field. And you know what? We started with some very large standard deviations. The curve was probably pretty amazing, if you ask me. But at the end, the evidence is in the results, and now with the scientific data that is being collected from soil samples and gasifiers, gasimeters that are being put in the ground, we now have identified not only the large scale biological activity through the CO2 emissions out of the soil, but also the effectiveness of the nutritional balance of that soil because of the output of the hazelnut, which has been optimized. Technically, we are optimizing the full expression of the genetics of the chicken and the full expression of the genetics of the species growing around the chicken.
So Reggie, that's a good segue to my question, because I remember when I think maybe it was one of the first times I heard you present, and you were talking about your proof of concept and all the different types of ecosystems where you had, you'd been at Pine Ridge, you'd done this in Guatemala, you'd done this in arid environments. And I think it would be really interesting for the group to hear about the different ecosystems that you've introduced, your chicken, where you were testing this to see if it would work in different climates. Could you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yes. So the bottom line of any system is that you have to set criteria and standards. So I call them PCIVs, principles, criteria, indicators, and verifiers. Right. So that's the scientific methodology for developing standards, and then the methodology for conducting audits. And so instead of developing a model for raising chickens, we developed a process by which you read the ecological blueprint of a space, from species, native species, to soil, to precipitation, to temperatures, high and low, all of that, slopes and types of soils and so on. And then based on that ecological data input, you can actually get a sense of what the soil may do, what the space may do if you put a system like ours. And so for the sort of dry desert-like conditions of Guanajuato in Mexico, what we did was we actually reduced the density of the broilers by 25%, because we knew that that was more or less the calculations based on the precipitation and all that compared to the prototypes that we had developed in Minnesota. Now, you may think, well, what, Minnesota and the highlands? Well, the beauty of these systems is the biophysics and the chemistry of the planet are exactly the same no matter where in the planet you go. What changes, what changes in how that biophysical and chemical processes work, what changes it is precipitation, temperature, and nutrition. And so you can actually come down to a blueprint of a process by which you take the native species, and as long as you got some information on what they like and what they don't. So for example, apples in the highlands of Guatemala, we knew not to use them just intrinsically. Why? Because apples and prunes, they need to certain what is called cold hours accumulation. Now the bird, and by the way, those cold hours is not in the air. It's in the root systems within 6 inches of the soil. That's where the temperature is going. The apple has a thermometer in a chart and is looking at it, and is calculating how many hours, at 6 inches of depth. And if those conditions are not there, it starts to have serious issues with diseases. It becomes vulnerable, like if you and I were put in 115 degrees in the tropics and not given much water and all of that, right? So we'll get sick. And so the broiler specifically lays down on the ground a lot under the shade, and it disrupts the cold hour cycles of those plants that need them, right? Well, we knew that because we are agronomists. Now, if you take that and then combine it with all of these other characteristics of the chicken, how much manure it puts out, how much nitrogen do the native plants need? For example, the mulberries. Mulberries actually love chickens, as compared to apples. And you would think, well, what's the difference? Well, the mulberry doesn't need cold hours and it's a high nitrogen sucker. And if you look at, we went to in this place in Mexico. And this we do everywhere. Like I did that in Pine Ridge Reservation. We did it in the highlands of Guatemala. We did it in the border within Ecuador and Colombia with the 9 native communities there. Same exercise. We gather the elders. We have them explain what the place would look like if colonizers and extraction companies have never arrived. And they give you a blueprint of the original species that thrive and the foods that people ate. And then we go through each one of them and try to gather as much information as possible so we can get the nutritional footprints. And then that we compare it with what the poultry is going to be putting out. And now you got a blueprint of a process to take this anywhere on the planet.
Thank you.
Since I was going to say, I'm sorry as a guest, but I'm just so curious. You mentioned broilers. So are you using exclusively meat chickens? And is there any variance in the breeds that you're using as you've done this around the world?
Yes. So I done the systems for both broilers and egg layers. I set up the prototypes here in Minnesota for both, and then decided cold climate and egg layers, they don't go together. When you get the urge to do chickens up here in the cold climate region in the US, literally lay down until the urge goes away, because you're just gonna be punishing yourself. And it's not worth it. Now, if you want sick chickens so that you can have eggs at home, by all means, do whatever you need to do, because the MasterCard can't buy that. All right, so I don't know if you know that. Everything else, MasterCard can buy that. No, you can't buy it with money, right? Because it's culture, it's all kinds of other things, and that I'm okay doing. But if you want to make a business, no, you're better off going south of Kansas. From the half of Kansas south of there, the temperature actually doesn't drop below 20 degrees for more than like 3 or 4 or 5 days. And that is like, okay, the hens won't have any problem. They won't even lose their feathers. So anyway, bottom line is we did both. We did the egg layers and we did the broilers. And the broilers, we can raise them during the warm season here, shut down in the winter, go to Guatemala and come back when it's warm again. And you make a business work on a farm level. But the broiler and the egg layer are their behavior and their impact on the landscape is so massively different that they just may as well be different species because they are totally different. For example, the broiler takes 70 days. And by the way, to your question about the breeds, we have tested over 15 breeds. There is 4 that are qualified to be raised. All of them are slow growth, 70-day maturity, 65 to 70-day maturity, harvestable weight at 6.5 pounds, yield at 3.75 to 4.25 pounds of actual carcass yield. And that's like basic standards that by which we do the broilers. Now I have tested all of the breeds we use up to now, and there is a very strict protocol, just like how we select hazelnuts and the characteristics and all of those things, as you may imagine. Same thing with the egg layers. And so in Mexico, in Colombia, we actually, in Guatemala, it's only egg layers. In the US, we're doing only broilers because we're working from Pine Ridge Reservation and north of that. And where I am right now, where my farm is, there is a network of farms now. We bought our own meat packing facility. We got our own processing facility, collectively owned and operated. We just got a $5 million climate smart commodity grant. So we now are introducing all of the grains. We'll be producing and bagging and distributing our own grain for sprouting, and also brought into the ecosystem of grain processing facility. And now we got the growing. And just February this year, I became the chief ecosystem officer, CEO of Tree Ranch Farms, and we have now launched Tree Ranch Farms in the Tree Ranch Chicken brand, and we are now on 22 stores in the Twin Cities and as far as the northern Iowa, and we are now established markets for $1 million worth of sales per year. So all of that is part of this process. So those breeds, I mean, I know you asked about breeds, you didn't want the whole story, but I'll tell you anyway. So the breeds actually were selected on the basis of what consumers actually want: texture, taste, and slow growth conditions, because we want the only way we can get nutritional density in a chicken is if you let it grow slow. If you rush it, a Cornish broiler is never going to be a nutrient dense meat, because it doesn't have enough time and the organs of the animals don't have enough time to develop. By the time you harvest them, it's too early. They didn't have time to actually even generate proper muscular structure and bone structures to the point that they can't even walk. And so that is, we're never used the broiler the industrial broiler to begin with, and it's just unfit for regenerative systems. And so back to the differentiation, the broiler goes out at 70 days. It only spent maybe a week as an adult in that paddock. The egg layer, it takes 6 months. 22 weeks, 18 to 22 weeks to egg laying age, and then spends 85 weeks as an adult in those paddocks. The pressure that egg layer is going to put on that space is absolutely different than the pressure that a broiler is going to put. Even though the broiler is heavier and sheds more literally, the egg layer is going to put a lot more pressure on that space, but it also ranges at a rate of 2 to 3 times more than the broiler. So now this allows us to do each flock at 2,000 egg layers per flock and back them up against each other. So we can actually, in a single coop, divide it to the middle with the nests, facing each side. On each side of the center, we can put a 2,000 bird flock on the right, a 2,000 bird flock on the left, a single egg collection system in the middle, mechanized collection of eggs, mechanized watering, mechanized feeding, and put 2 paddocks on one side, 2 paddocks on the other, and the egg layers range on their own. They actually don't need training. They don't need the food outside like the broilers. And so the management system for the egg layer is totally different. And the apples actually don't mind them because they don't lay around in the couch like the broilers do.
How do you handle predation for protecting all these birds?
Well, we don't. The bottom line is that chickens are superbly at is smart, just like every organism on the planet. Put in a vulnerable position where it can't defend itself, it gets killed, us included. Put that same organism in its natural environment where it knows how to protect itself, and you don't have a problem. That's why Gallus gallus is a jungle fowl. You put Gallus gallus back in the jungle, it knows what to do. And so a hawk, it's just gonna go to the neighbor's chickens in our case. So seriously, the protection of the chicken, the canopy is the key to eliminating the aerial predation, and the perimeter fences on the ground, it eliminates the ground-based predation, because every predator that we have encountered here comes out at night, and at night they're locked up in a completely secure building. During the day, they only the aerial predators come out, and they are protected and secluded under the trees. So at the very beginning, before the forest gets established, and all of that protective structure gets established, sometimes we lose some chickens, but we are just more careful. We are around more while the trees grow, or we plant taller trees right away if we have access to them. Or in some cases, people have put the units straight where there is already woods, and that way they don't even have to wait. The owls, the only one that gave me a little bit of trouble was an eastern screeching owl. The darn animal is so freaking smart. And so I didn't know what was eating the chickens. I just knew it was an aerial predator. And it will come like 3 feet off the ground for like 500 yards. So you couldn't see that it was coming. And it will go straight up into this perch and just sit there immobile. So if you didn't see it go up, you would have to know it was there before if you wanted to see it. And then it would just wait there until it knew the whole coast was clear. And then it will dash straight to the chicken, and off it goes. It was impossible to do anything. So we set a very humane trap with a blanket, and we use our innate intelligence from the rainforest, where we learn to trap almost anything. And so we caught it and brought it to a place called the Big Woods, a very large 300-acre reserve south of us, and far enough that it wouldn't come back. And we released it. We thanked it for its service, and it went on its way. But that's the only one that gave me a headache for about a week. The only other predator that is always been a problem is the people, because there are folks from the city who come out here with their dogs. They park their car on any of the little roads that where the cornfields are, and they figure, oh, it's nobody here, so they let their dogs loose, and the dogs get the scent of the chickens, and they go nuts because they have no idea what's going on. They will crash against the fence and climb even and get over to go and kill those chickens. And that is a real problem. And luckily for us, we trap the dogs too. And until they pay for all the chickens, that dog is hanging higher and higher on a rope, hanging from its neck. And the owners definitely pay once they see their dog go up on the post. So anyway, just kidding. We don't do that.
I watched a wave of relief go over Gianna's face. You have your hand raised. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question for Reggie. So I was so fascinated by what you mentioned about your work with communities in South America, how you had asked them to reimagine the landscape pre-colonization. And to me, that just indicates a very strong connection between this revival of Indigenous knowledge and your work. And I'm just curious as to what you see the connection is between those two things.
Well, let me just back us up just for a second for a quick meditation. If you truly want to know who you are, who I am, all you have to do is imagine where you came from. And if you're a scientist and you know the facts, you will know, one, you're a carbon-based life form. Two, you are made of the elements of the earth. Everything in your body is coming from the earth. And so you are literally, by definition, indigenous to this planet. Where you were born, who your parents are, where they came from, it doesn't matter, because you're indigenous to the planet by birth, by the fact that you are endogenous, and the species endogenous to the planet. That is what makes us indigenous. Now, whether we grow up to practice our indigenousness is a whole different story, because we are born both indigenous to the planet and creatures born to colonize and to take over, just like the worms and the crickets, except we are just bigger worms and bigger crickets. And so, and we got brains that are bigger, and we got equipment, and we got all kinds of things, right? So anyway, there was a chat message coming in. And so the bottom line is that when you go to these communities, that traditional ecological knowledge is still nestled in the way people are, in the way you are, whether you are an indigenous, operate from an indigenous mindset, or you operate from a colonizer mindset. The colonizer sees 2% of the landscape. It only sees what it can be extracted and taken. It doesn't see the other 97, 98% of the potential of that space, because everything else is a waste, right? Oh, there's trees. Dang it, we got to cut them down so we can plant corn and put cattle or whatever, right? Oh, there is a savanna here in the Midwest. Well, dang, now we got to plow. Let's invent equipment that is bigger and chemical so that we can destroy it, so that we can put what we want. That's the colonizer mind. And so when you come into these spaces, the beauty of working with indigenous mindsets is that you can have a conversation about the other 98 potential of any landscape, and people will describe it for you in such level of detail that it's a matter of hours before you got a strategic plan for full scale food sovereignty and independence. And that is why the United States of America made it a mission to ensure that the native communities that practice indigenous ways in this country did not have access to using their land as an asset, because if they could, they would actually be the breadbasket of this country, but they can't, because they don't have access to their own land. And that's the foundational principle of how you colonize a culture that refuses to colonize its mind. And so this is the beauty of that other part of the work, is the part that is most rewarding. And it is, I hope, what is rewarding for you all. This meditation is, it's not an answer to your question. It's an actual, I'm pulling out of your own knowledge, because everything I just said, you already knew it. You just didn't know you did.
Thank you.
Well, maybe some of you already did. I'm not gonna say that, but
Well, Reggie, I think we're starting to run up against the clock, sadly. So I'd like to see if there are any other questions that people might have while we have you. And there's an Indiegogo that Tree Range Farms is doing right now. I encourage everybody to look at it and watch the video. It's so exciting to see this work, because as you were saying earlier, it just, it hits all the markers. It's regenerative and it's ecologically sound, but it's also culturally sound. It's economically accessible. And it's just, as these stacked enterprises that are so fantastic and create other income streams besides the chicken itself, with the hazelnut, like high value crops like that, and elderberry and so forth. So just really super excited that you were able to join us today and help people who are on their path to regeneration sort of get some clarity on the opportunities that are out there. But anyone else have there's a hand. Jenny Rizzo.
Hi, thanks. I'm just curious about how you protect the saplings with the chickens.
very good question. So hold on a second. Trying to show you the moon. I click on the wrong thing. Can you hear me though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, I will stop messing with this thing. The we put cages around them, protective cages when they are little, because the chickens will destroy them. And but the beauty of it is that when we use those cages around the trees when they're little, we use these rectangular welded wired fences that we cut into circles, and then we put them around them. And when the chickens come out to range, when they are 20 days 28 days old, they actually fit through those openings, so they get inside the cage, weed and fertilize the hazelnut. And by the time they grow to the point that they could damage the plant, they don't fit to the holes. And so they can't get to the plants. So they still do their job, but they can't damage the plant. And that allows us to grow really healthy hazelnuts inside the paddocks.
Cool. Ben, you have one final question?
Yeah, I don't want to take everyone's time, but I was really curious about Reggie's Indiegogo fundraiser, because I'm doing a similar fundraiser for my project, and I've been in cahoots with a lot of people about the best way to do it, and I'm not sure if you do that yourself, Reggie, or if you have somebody else helping to manage that for you, but I just would like to know more about that.
Well, we're honestly is one area we're miserably failing at. Unless you make some contributions right now, we
It's
actually
hard.
don't have much of a success story to tell. It's very hard. We did hire a very young, creative person who's looking at it, but I mean, I think she's out of ideas already. And I sent it all around the country, and I got over 10,000 people in my email list. And apparently, I'm not that influential after all. So anyway, we're still raising capital. It's just not the Indiegogo isn't really doing it. I mean, we're still in the middle of raising $2.5 million seed capital, and Jenny, our chief of operations, really wanted to get the Indiegogo campaign because, I mean, it just made sense that with so much support that we have from markets to nonprofits to investors and all of that, that this would be one of those successful things. So maybe we just don't know how to do it, and we haven't yet enlightened enough to ask the right person to help us out. But if any of you knows, is a guru of these things and knows what needs to be done, it's not like we don't have a top-notch story, but just maybe this is not the area people are looking for to support. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyway, sorry, but I can't help you very much on that one.
well, no worries about helping. Maybe I'll email you later, and maybe you can connect me with the person who's kind of coordinating that for you, because I think what you have there is honestly really good. And the video that you've created is super powerful. And so I'm curious, why maybe you haven't raised as much financial or donations through that program, but I'll connect with you, and maybe you can put me in contact with that woman who's taking care of it for you.
Oh yeah, right away.
Awesome.
Well, I owe you not only apology, but all the time you want. So I finally got into this spot where the sound is good and the moon looks beautiful. So I'm here for as long as you want. I mean, with some boundaries, but not many.
So did you just go to the summit in Denver, Rahi? The regenerative finance? Were you there?
Yeah, I'm coming from the RFSI, and I had this massive ear infection, so I couldn't fly. I had my plane ticket and everything, but I couldn't fly, so I grabbed the truck and just drove to Denver.
Oh wow.
So I'm just finishing my drive back to Minnesota now, and from that, and I forgot that I had a handful of machetes on the back seat, and then when I got there, the guys who were going to park the cars like, "What the hell?" I said, "Whoa! I was going to the farm, and then I realized that I didn't have time, so I just took off, and I didn't retrieve the tools of the trade, and I hadn't noticed it. I'm glad I didn't get stopped by the police, because I don't know what they would have thought with all those machetes on the back."
Oops. But our ambassadors are finding their regenerative journey, and it looks different, as you know, for everybody. But since you were just at this forum, like, what are some opportunities for people who maybe weren't born on the farm or a ranch and have studied something else to get into the regenerative movement? Like, what advice would you give to people who are just getting going on their own personal regenerative journey?
Well, we call them asset mapping, and I've done this systemically and thoroughly across everywhere I have lived. So first of all, you identify who's doing anything in the closest distance to you, because that's the low-hanging fruit. And those folks would know other folks. And so it kind of expands really quickly. In Northfield alone, I have met with over 3,000 people, to give you an idea of how vast a local network can be. And a lot of times we think we have to fly to Australia to go find the regenerators, but most of them are right there next to you. And that's the most powerful way to build a truly regenerative system, because what's regenerative about having to fly across the country even to go meet someone, right? There's nothing regenerative about that. You can't even establish permanent connections with them. So start from there. Use the indigenous mindset, like I said, and then map out who's doing what, map out by sector. So what is your sector? Is it vegetables? Is it agroforestry? Is it chickens, pork, cattle? And then focus on those specific sectors, because they are very specialized. So for example, I just went to the finance sector, but in December, I'm going to be presenting at the Acres USA conference. Right, the Acres USA is kind of like a mismatch of everybody coming in together, and you have everybody from fertilizer, regenerative inputs, right? Like, if there was such a thing, but is part of the movement, because people just appropriate the name no matter what they're doing, and then you get the regional conferences. So depending on where you are, look for those regional conferences, because they are bringing together the people around you. So for me, for example, there is the Minnesota Organic Conference. There is the Marvel Seed that happens in Wisconsin, which brings the region together. There is NOFA out in the Northeast. There is OEFA in Ohio, and so all of those regional networks are kind of like the next layer. But you have to have a destination. You got to know which sector you're going to be focusing on, because otherwise it's easy to get lost. And then of course there is the specialized conferences, like the grass-fed exchange, for example, happens every year. And that grass-fed exchange is very exclusive to grass-fed beef, right? And so if you are in that sector, that's probably the best place to go network on a national level, and then find the local folks. And then most likely there is local gatherings going on. There's Sustainable Farming Association for us. Like, I became a member of our chapter right here in the Cannon River, like way back, because that's the way to connect to that local movement, the local movement builders. And then have your narrative figured out, so that you don't come in as an imposter. That is probably the worst thing going on right now. One, we get the imposter syndrome ourselves, like, oh, should I go to that? Do I know enough about it? So this is why I work with you a little bit today on mindset. If you are practicing indigenous ways, if you are committed to that, you cannot be an imposter, because you are a carbon-based life form, and you are simply the expression of the energy of the universe in a walking form and thinking and talking form. That makes you legit if you actually believe that and think that way. And then you go into those spaces, and from that standpoint, you can speak to anything going on: a vegetable grower, an agroforester, a chicken grower, a cattle grower, because at the end of the day, what are we but simply stewards of energy transformation processes that go from non-edible to edible forms? With that, then you can build the networks, because you will never be an imposter, and you don't have to feel like one. That's my advice.
I love that. Can we quote you on that? We're simply stewards of transformational processes. So cool.
The process, we are simply stewards of process of energy transformation that take energy from non-edible into edible forms. And that's simply, as farmers, that's simply what we do. We think we produce shit, but nobody does except the chicken, I guess. But I mean, we're adults here. We can talk honestly.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Beautiful. Well, we are so happy that you were able to join us today. That was really special. You know, we have a little wish list of people that we would like, and you were on it, but I just thought, oh my God, Reggie is just like, he's everywhere at once and like doing so many things and speaking at so many events and getting awards and starting businesses. And there's no way he's going to have time to talk to us. And then when you just like answered my LinkedIn request, like within seconds, I was like, oh my God, this guy's amazing, which I already knew, but just the fact that you know, made the time for us. We really, really appreciate. This is our inaugural cohort. We'll do this again next year, and we'll have probably a slightly bigger class, but we're just you know, figuring it out as we go. But we really love learning from people that are doing the work. And we're so honored that you took the time to spend with us today.
Well, I feel so blessed that you were patient, because I really thought I had already lost you by the time I was able to figure this out. And I signed myself out of the app, and I don't even remember my password. So I had to turn the phone off and turn it back on so it will reload itself. And I'm like, okay, these folks probably think I'm so stupid.
Yeah. We've all been there. It's happened to everyone.
Anyway, it's beautiful to share. I come from a culture where if you have an opportunity to share, then you build your own energy. Every sacred object and everything that is sacred is only sacred to the extent that you share it. And this work is sacred. And so refusing to share it is actually opposite to what makes it worth it.
Well, it's incredible. Well,
Thank you.
I hope our paths cross again soon, Reggie.
Please make them. The world in life is about what we make of it.
All right. Well, thank you. And thanks to everybody who came, our visitors. I think we might want to do a little housekeeping before we adjourn.
Do you want me to leave for that part?
Oh, it's up to you.
Might not be as exciting for you.
Might not be that exciting, but
Thank you,
Well,
Reggie.
thank you. Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Thank you.
bye.
Thank
Come to California.
Thank you, Reggie.
Will do. So all
Okay.
you have to do is invite me. In fact, I will
Okay.
be there in November. I will be giving a lecture at Stanford, and
Oh.
they're doing a fun investor meeting after that at Stanford. If you send me an email, I'll tell Jen to send you the info.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can go to Stanford. That's like an hour and a half away. Yeah, no problem.
Oh,
Definitely.
wow. Awesome.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank
Okay.
you, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Reggie. Excellent. Amazing. Well, folks, don't want to hold you too much later here. This was such an incredible final raw meeting for me, and I'm excited to come back as one of Kyle's honored guests to another one. And I'm excited to pass the baton on to Kyle. So Kyle, I don't know if you have a few words or if you just want to give folks a sense of when they'll hear from us again. And I will leave my piece at that. And I hope everybody stays in touch. Please stay in touch.
Yeah, I think we ought to just give everybody, let's give Caroline a round of applause. I mean, she's just,
Oh God.
we will miss
Yeah.
you. It's a little hard to even let it sink in that you're leaving us. So you have to come back as an honored guest.
Well, I'll definitely be going down to Stanford to see Reggie. So we'll see.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do a soil centric field trip. Anybody that wants to drive to Stanford, that actually would be really fun if we all
Yeah.
showed up.
When was that event again?
He said November, but he didn't give a date.
Yeah.
But actually, that would be really hilarious. Like we all show up at some finance class at Stanford.
That would be
I would
awesome.
be up for that.
I do want to say, Caroline, thank you so much for all of your work, all of your hard work on this, and bringing your education mindset to it, and just like really being creative and an awesome collaborator and leader. And I appreciate your work so much. As far as what's next, you'll be hearing from me in the next 2 weeks around the next meeting. We have our speaker lined up, and I'll announce that in the email just to make sure that it works for them. But yeah, basically, I think that we're going to have one more meeting and then wrap it up. And I'll send this out in the email. But if you could think, it'd be really useful if you could think about some quotes or some things that were helpful, kind of like almost a testimonial, just because we're going to try to bring more people together for this next year. And so your experience is super valuable to we want to know how you felt about it and what stood out. Also, we're going to put together just a brief survey to find out what we could have done better, and what you're looking for going forward as far as maintaining our community so that people can stay in touch and that kind of thing. So yeah, just look for an email in the next week or so about scheduling, and then basically, I know we've only got Ben and Gianna still on the call, but I'll send out an update to folks. But thank you so much to everyone for being here today, and I look forward to taking the torch and seeing what we can do together.
Thank you, Caroline. I mean, really, it's just been such an honor. We're going to miss you, so I hope you do come back. I hope they don't work you so hard that you don't have the time, but you could be a speaker. Oh, your regenerative journey going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Hey, Kyle and Caroline, I have a quick question for both of you. I'm not sure if it would be possible, but I think it would be really neat because we recorded all these sessions, if it's possible to share those with us at the end of the course or the program, just because like Reggie was saying so many good things so fast. There's no way that I could digest it all or write it down. So I just resorted to listening, but that'd be super helpful.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I know I think we have most of them recorded. I don't think we have all of them, but yes, the recordings that we do have, I'll share a Google Drive folder and it basically just plays them as YouTube videos from that folder. So happy to send that out. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Cool. Well, we can.
Yeah, don't forget your climate coaching. I know not everybody's done it. Judy is she's phenomenal. You're really lucky to have her as a resource. And yeah, she's at your disposal. So before the session runs out, let's get everybody. She's just like, she knows this landscape like no one I've ever met. So sign up for your coaching. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Well, great to see you, Katrina.
Thanks. I'm just hanging out. I kind of miss you guys, I just wanted to stay on a little long.
Nice. We can have just a chill Zoom session soon.
Yeah, we can hang. Just turn the recording off.
So good to see you. I'm gonna hop off, but this was really cool. And yeah, he was brilliant. So just like Ben said, it was like I was still thinking about the thing he just said, and then he would say something more insightful, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, now I'm thinking about that. So it's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel really inspired. So thanks.
Well, thank you for joining tonight.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah.
See you guys soon.
Oh, and you guys check out his book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what was it called again?
It is called
In the Shadow of the Green Man.
In the Shadow of the Green Man. Yeah, maybe I'm sure he put all the things he just like very quickly summarized in more depth into that book. So maybe
the book's really more about his experience growing up in the Guatemalan rainforest.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's like the backstory that he didn't really give us.
Okay.
But he meant, he kind of alluded to it a little bit. So yeah.
Nice. Well,
there you go, Katrina.
I have some homework. Thanks,
Nice.
y'all. Good night or good morning.
Good night.
wherever you are.
All right.
Thanks, folks.
Everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.